people often, not as much like, I mean, it's not like I'm in touch with senior leadership, but yeah, I've been in the loop of what's going on. A few people live nearby me.
You know, I saw this weekend, I saw, do you know Ed Case and Megan Swan?
No, not the best of names, to be frank.
Yeah, there were two people that went from gray to good B.
Nice. I feel like if I saw their face, Ed sounds familiar.
Yeah, they were both producers.
Yeah.
Usually at the beginning, I ask if anybody has any hot takes on ads, and I feel like Maria and Holland probably definitely have some hot takes on ads.
Yes. Maria actually just wrote a whole article about the Apple ad. I don't know if you saw it, but
I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Maria agrees to disagree.
Wait, what?
I didn't like it. I thought it was boring.
Oh, I loved her article on it.
Oh, I thought you were like, I love the ad. I was like,
I commented on it.
What was your take?
Basically, I actually took an approach of, I thought it was very realistic, but I thought that the way that they were portraying like the work-life balance scenario was pretty irresponsible, to be honest. Like, yes, it's a lot of our realities, but it shouldn't be. And I feel like Apple is so future forward thinking that I just expected a little bit more from them than like the now. They didn't reflect anything new to us. We're like, yep, that's life.
I thought you were referring to the one that just came out that was shot in like vertically with Damien Chazelle.
Oh, no. I was talking about the one where it's like tools.
Yeah. I didn't like it either. It just stressed me out. It's just like, that's the reality that I'm living in. Didn't really.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Hold on,
also like their tools are like our second nature to us, that I didn't feel like sales. It just felt like they were just emphasizing my issues.
It was like watching The Devil Wears Prada, but without who is it? Helen Mirren.
Oh, yeah. Is it Helen Mirren or is it, what's her name? The icon.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not Helen Mirren. It's oh my god, I can picture her face. Who?
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. Thank you.
Meryl Streep. Thank you.
There's a brave voice person.
A goddess's name.
Mine isn't really a take on an ad, but I was like reading an article the other day about how Chewy is killing it with their and just like their advertising is driving their sales. Maria, we kind of talked about this, and I was like, I don't really know if it's like their advertising or the fact that like everyone just got dogs, like chicken or the egg here.
Yeah, fair.
That's interesting.
I sold the doorbell just rang because I sold a print of my photography, actually. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that's awesome.
Fabulous.
Are you advertising for your prints on the
now I mean, you guys are all gonna see it now. Hopefully it came out good.
Anyway, link in bio.
Hold on, let's see if it came out. Oh shit, this is super nice. All right, you guys ready? This is I'm advertising anybody wants to buy a print here. Oh shit, this is so complicated. Oh no, everybody's waiting for me now.
Yeah, come on, man.
Hold on.
Oh my god.
Well, this is all oh no.
We need the Jeopardy time.
Okay, you guys ready? Here.
Ooh.
Oh, that's sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool. I love the dead white space.
Yeah.
Is this a performance piece?
My whole life is a performance piece.
I kind of believe that.
Did it come out good? Do I like this? Huh. Well, I would have just sent it to the person who bought it, but they were like, "Can you sign it?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I can." How exciting is that?
What did you like, to a friend, or like you
It
got a
was a
shop
friend of a
now,
friend.
or?
It was a friend of a friend. It was like, "Hey, like, do you sell prints?" And obviously I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." I've like never sold a fucking print in my life. So I was like, "All right, I'll figure out how to do it."
Don't forget the little people when you get big and famous.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, this is some hot news. Do you guys see the Reddit article, the leak that there's like internal drama at Reddit about whether or not to run ads for Trump, and they've decided to run the ads.
Hmm.
It's an unpopular opinion, but I think, and it's like, I don't know, as a platform, it's like really difficult to like set a precedent like that, where you say, we're going to pick a candidate who can't advertise here.
Yeah.
I don't work at Reddit anymore. That's why I can say this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think you're picking a side, and you're getting in the weeds with a lot of legal situations.
Yeah.
What did Twitter do? I can't remember. Did they decide to?
Twitter actually flagged some of his
Right.
tweets as
Was it
fake.
paid, or was it just his organic? Like,
It was organic. I don't think it was his paid political like campaign.
right.
Yeah, I don't know if he runs Twitter ads. I would think that he would. I don't know. I have no clue.
I imagine he's using all the platforms, sort of set the precedent for it. But yeah, anyone that will allow him, at least. Funny enough, one of our clients is a cryptocurrency exchange, and they ban crypto from advertising, but not like, false information. It's pretty incredible.
Twitter actually did ban Trump's campaign.
They did.
Interesting.
For misinformation.
So he can't run ads there?
I don't know if it's ads ever or just that specific campaign. He's temporarily blocked though as of 5 days ago.
Yeah, it's different when you have behavior and precedent on the platform where he really there hasn't been, I think he did like an AMA in the Donald back in 2016. But I think even the Donald hated it because it was like he only answered like 5 questions and they were like obvious plants.
Yeah, they said that they banned him because he said children were immune from coronavirus.
Interesting.
Jeez.
Oh, interesting. Kathleen, you have a good source for that? Kathleen in the comments says no political ads on Twitter are allowed.
Yeah, here I'll link to the Twitter page. Actually, it's all paid advertising for any political group or politician. It sounds like.
Well, that's one way to take care of it. He was probably
Actually like
the one
that.
with the budget to be doing it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, political ads are a weird territory.
Yeah, it just reminds me of like the old school, like what we learned in social studies propaganda.
Yeah.
Just digital.
Yeah. And way more effective now. Actually, I guess, yeah, propaganda has always been effective. All right, it is 6:10. Oh, what do you got, Alex?
Yeah, basically, Facebook, part of their ad transparency, website has like how much each candidate spends on Facebook ads, like pretty much in the last 7 days. It's crazy.
What? 4.25 million in the last 6 days? That's bonkers. Wow. Okay. On that depressing note, let's get started with week 11 of our advertising school. This week we have a really unique lesson. This is data and strategy kind of combined into a single kind of a talk here, which is a lot of ground to cover. But I think we have exactly who ought to cover those topics for us. We have two alums from Gray who have co-founded their own agency called GoodQues. Actually, I don't know, do you guys call it an agency or do you not?
Strategic consultancy, but
A strategic
whatever flies.
Maria Vorovich and Holland Martini. Maria was global strategy director at Gray. Holland was an SVP of data strategy at Gray. Both have insanely awesome experience to share with us. And I'm super excited to go through their presentation because I got a sneak peek and it looks awesome, but I think the insight is really gonna like kind of flesh it out and bring it home. As usual, we'll do the hand raising thing throughout the presentation. If you have really pressing, urgent questions, go ahead and use the hand raise feature. Otherwise, just ask in the chat and we will have a Q&A session after the presentation. With that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Awesome. I'm gonna share my screen. Let me just make sure I'm sharing just a Chrome tab.
Yeah, I always get super nervous.
That's
like,
always,
yeah,
interesting territory to be in.
I made that mistake on my first client presentation as an independent person.
Oh, were you texting in the middle of it? That's when it gets awkward.
No, I was like sharing my screen so that they saw like my presenter notes instead of my slides.
Oh.
They didn't tell me for like 3 slides.
Oh, that
Okay.
one we've done plenty of times. There's much worse.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just sharing my Chrome tab. I'm gonna put this in presentation mode. Thumbs up, everything looks good?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So, we're going to start giving you guys a brief background on Maria and I. Joe kind of briefed through this. We'll give you a little bit more insight into the background of our career. I think that might help just in terms of how we got here. And then we'll dive into, what strategy is and kind of give you some real-time examples that can bring to life what that looks like in a day-to-day work environment.
I'll start. So my name is Maria, and one of the most common questions that people ask is, how do I get into strategy? Like, is there a strategy graduate program that I can join? Like, where do I begin? And I think my background is a pretty good testament that the road to becoming a strategist is pretty windy, and you can enter the road from many, many, many different paths. So for me, I actually entered from the brand side. And what that means is I joined a brand and I was their brand manager for a number of years. The brand was called 31 Philip Lim. It was a fashion brand. And I always say that it was my best possible schooling in terms of learning what strategy is and how to execute it. And the reason for that is, when you're at a brand, you're just firing off decisions all day, every day, especially the nature of the brand that I joined. We were growing very, very quickly. So we didn't have time to sit there and ruminate the way that often agencies, have the luxury of doing with timelines. So I started on the brand side and then I pivoted to agency. But interestingly, I didn't go into agency on the strategy side right away. I actually entered through something called account management. And account management is a little bit more of sort of the face, the salesperson, if you will, who directly liaisons with the client. And from there, I realized that I'm a horrible introvert and I don't really like people. And I realized that strategy was actually the job for me, because that's when, I can sort of hide in my little corner and think all day, and we'll take you guys through in terms of, what we're thinking about. But that's a little bit of my background of how I got into strategy. Before Holland and I started GoodQues, I was the chief strategy officer at a company called Air Paris. Before that, I was obviously at Gray, the way Joe mentioned. So the point is you can enter many, many different ways, but you could, get to the highest rank of strategy if that's what you want. And with that, I'll pass to Holland.
Cool. So let me I think exactly to Maria's point, you can get into strategy from various different angles, and you'll actually see as we take you along this journey with us that there's also different versions of strategy. So my background actually started in advanced analytics, which, is mind-numbing in some senses, especially when applied to specific industries. But within the marketing and advertising world, you can actually get really interesting, really fun projects to work on. So, you know, like I said, I started in advanced analytics, and what I learned was it can be applied creatively into brands and specifically advertising and campaigns. So my career ended me up at Gray, where I was actually helping Gray and started the data strategy team, learning to teach them how to take insight from data and apply it to strategy and creative. So what does that really mean? A lot of times strategy can be a little finger in the air. And it's not to say that's wrong by any means. There's instinct, and there's people who always have their finger on the pulse, and that's absolutely like valid and valuable to a strategist, and something that, you know, I make sure I do every day. But there's also those insights that you need to make sure, like, is this really going to drive business? Is this really going to be interesting? Or can this even be true? And that's when data can kind of come into space. And that's when you go and validate through different tools, and also find weird freak facts. So an example of a freak fact: out of every state in the United States, Alabama thinks that they're the most creative out of everyone else. So it's just funny little nuggets that then you can push off into campaigns. So that's a lot of what I spent my career doing at Gray, validating things and then using data to inspire. That's where Maria and I met, and that's really what the synthesis is of how we founded GoodQues, off of like that kind of principle. So what do we do?
Yeah, what is GoodQues, and why do we call ourselves a strategic consultancy instead of an agency, right? So Holland and I met at Gray. We realized we had this sort of perfect marriage where, you know, I appreciated data and loved it, and Holland knew how to, you know, turn the data into something really mind-blowingly creative. And we realized we had something special on our hands. So the reason we call ourselves a consultancy is because we do just that, meaning we found a little pocket, a little niche, and that's what we specialize in. Whereas a lot of the time when you hear the word agency, you know, it sort of nods to a little bit more of a 360 approach to servicing a client, which means that they'll often provide creative services and execution and production. Whereas for us, you know, we do just the bit of the research, the data, the strategy, and then we pass the baton. The really nice part is, having been in the industry for so long, we sort of have a network of folks that when we pass the baton, oftentimes it's people we work with, partner agencies, and so on. So that's quite nice because we don't leave our clients hanging, but we can have that sort of continuity with them. But in terms of what GoodQues does, if I'm, you know, being a little less ethereal, a client will come to us and they say, I have this problem. For example, I need to launch in the United States. What do I do? I mean, that's such a huge, lofty question, right? And it's our job to unpack that question into, you know, what can be done? And so we begin with something like research and data and aggregating, you know, the information that we need to know about the US and the competitive market so that we could launch. And then from there, we continue on this journey until we have enough information that we can make a very knowledgeable opinion and a judgment call of what our clients should do. And more or less in a nutshell, that's kind of the cyclical thing that we do for our clients. Our clients come to us with a question, we figure out the research and the data and the inputs that need to go into that, and then there's an output. The one layer that's worth mentioning that makes us a little bit different than anyone else who can do that is that Holland and I deeply, deeply, deeply believe in empathy. And what that means is we've sat in too many boardrooms in big, big brands that you all have used and heard of, where executives have talked around the table around their goals, their needs, their opinions, their thoughts, and they completely forget the end consumer, the end user. And every brand exists to service someone. And if you forget that someone, that's a losing formula. So for us, that empathy is the crux that makes us different. And we apply empathetic data to everything we do. That means we humanize data. That means for us, data isn't just numbers. It means that we're really looking and thinking about people and what people are feeling so that we can make a judgment call on behalf of a brand. So strategy, what is it? Let's get into it. We are still trying to figure it out. That's only half a joke. Strategy is this amorphous, ephemeral sort of definition of what it is, but we will try our best to explain to you what it has, the role it has played in our lives and how we've been able to build a career out of it. And Holland, if you go to the next slide, so the need to know terminology, and there is a ton, right? But we didn't want to give you guys a dictionary lesson. You could do that yourself. But for me, this is probably one of the most important lessons that I've ever had. And it's the difference between a strategy, a tactic, and a plan. So if you think about a strategy, it's really that decision that I was talking about, right? And it's informed by something, and it helps to achieve a greater business goal. Think of the strategy as the sort of what and the why. So I'll give you guys an example. So say that there's a brand X and they want to increase their sales with 25-year-old women, right? So the decision of how we are going to do that and the why behind it is the sort of strategy. Then there's the tactic. The tactic is the how. So we say, okay, the goal for the business is that they want to increase their sales with this cohort of women. The strategy is going to be the fact that we are going to speak to them in this comical, light tone. We're going to, go sort of where they are and get on their level. The how is going to be, we have noticed that all of these women are on TikTok, so we are going to reach them on TikTok. So that becomes a tactic. So that is a little node on your strategy that starts to be what we call execution, meaning you're actually going to put out something into the market. And finally, there's the plan, which is sort of the connector, right? It's all of these little tactics combined. So if you think of this as a little chart, and I can't help but to think in charts because that's a lot of the time how we sell our thinking. The strategy is across the top. This is the decision that you have made in order to service to achieve that business goal. Underneath that is your tactic, right? And then holistically, altogether, you have a plan. So that's very important because a lot of the time, especially in agencies, someone will say, I have a strategy. My strategy is TikTok. Well, that's not a strategy. That is a tactic. But what is your strategy? What's the bigger decision? What's that core, that heart, the why, the what that you're going to do to achieve that business goal?
And I think it's important, like as Maria's speaking, strategy, it is such like this ethereal big word, and it's all encompassing. And I think a lot of people are like, well, what really is it? And it's all encompassing because it really is. Strategy can be applied to many different things. There can be a brand strategy, which is really how as a brand are we presenting ourselves to the world? But there can be strategy for, just a specific media channel. How do we launch on mobile? What do we do on search? It can get very in the weeds and it can get very specific. And then there are things like data strategy, like the kind of how I started my career and what our focus is on. And data strategy, like I said before, is the application of data to make business decisions and brand decisions, right? So you can see there's all these different facets, and strategy kind of encompasses all of them. It's really just what is that smart, informed decision making that will help drive your business based on any of these tactics that encompasses the brand. And today specifically, I think, the best way to go about this and really show you it in working terms is to focus on brand, the campaign, and creative content. So the brand, literally, like, what is the brand? What was the decision they made? The campaign, how did it come to life? And really dissecting that creative content.
So the way that we organized this for you guys, we wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. So we wanted to work backwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you 3 ads, and then we're going to unpack them from the perspective of what the heck was the client thinking? What was their ask to the agency? What was the so-called insight, right? That like data or that information that fueled the decision? What was the message, and who were they trying to speak to? So we'll unpack all of that for 3 different ads. And with that, we're calling it the anatomy of an ad, and we'll show you guys a quick 30-second spot and go from there.
Yeah, and quickly before we start, all of the pieces that we're dissecting are the pieces that are kind of part of day-to-day strategy, right? So because the insight is really what we push our strategy off of. The audience, which you'll see, is where we decide who we'll want to talk to and how we make those decisions. So all of these kind of facets that we're going to deconstruct are things that strategists focus on and need to know every day. So here's your first ad. I will play it. You guys are probably familiar with it. If not, enjoy.
Man, I might just chill tonight.
Puppy monkey baby. 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 Puppy monkey baby.
Mountain Dew Kickstart. Dew, juice, caffeine.
Cool. So kind of a lot to take in, and I'll let Maria dissect this ad for you.
So make a note in your mind whether you like it or you hate it. And then, Holland, actually, if we can move on to the next slide. So think about if you like it and you hate it, and then forget it. It doesn't matter whether you like it or you hate it. And the reason we say that is because it was effective. And what do we mean by effective? It was the most talked about Super Bowl ad of 2016. And yeah, Joe, you just said so memorable. And we'll use that word again. You can't unsee it. I love that. Thank you, Olivia. But that's exactly it, right? So if you go to the next slide, we talked about this. These are all the pieces we're going to talk about. This is everything we're unpacking for you guys today. So let's start with the client ask. Puppy, monkey, baby. Did the Mountain Dew client really get into an office and be like, give me a puppy, give me a monkey, give me a baby? Probably not, right? So we have to start with the occasion. So the Super Bowl, right? So the Super Bowl is the advertising event of the year. And why? And most people think it's the eyeballs, right? So people tune into it. A lot of people care about football, especially in America. But that's actually not entirely true. So yes, there are a lot of eyeballs, but what you're actually paying for, and the reason the Super Bowl is such a highly esteemed moment in culture, is because it's the only time where people are giving consent to watch and enjoy the ads, right? And what do I mean by that? How many times have you heard someone say, I only watch the Super Bowl for the advertising? So I'll pause there just to let that sink in. So that is not something that we ever deal with. So the kind of language that advertisers typically use is, we need to disrupt our audience. We need to capture them. So the Super Bowl is this one moment where no one needs to be captured. They're willingly walking into your cage. They're replaying it. They're talking about it. They're doing this on Twitter and everywhere. So the client asked, and I can guarantee, was how do you make me memorable? Make me the unforgettable ad out of all the ads that people watch in the Super Bowl. And that's the ask. And now the agency has to figure out, well, geez, how the heck do I do that? And that's where we'll move on to the campaign objective. So campaign objective, is it as easy as making the ad unforgettable? Not quite. Yes and no, right? So that is the client ask. But the job of a strategist is also to dig a little bit deeper. For the client, for the business, right, they're looking at their bottom line more than anything. Sure, it could be unforgettable, but are people buying Mountain Dew? So, really the client ask is make me unforgettable so that when people are in the store, it's top of mind for them. So if they're scouring the shelves of what to buy, they have that awareness, they have that knowledge that this product exists, and they might seek it out, right? So that campaign objective is actually that one step underneath the unforgettable so that people buy the product. And then we can move on to the audience. So the audience in this case is actually quite self-explanatory, so we won't spend too much time on it. It's obviously targeted to a male audience, right? It's targeted to the Super Bowl audience. So they're not really talking to anyone else. They're not really trying to, get to the female sort of cohort that might be watching the Super Bowl. And the reason I say that is even at the tone, you can kind of see that they're, nodding to sort of the college humors of the world, right? They're nodding to that sort of really quirky humor that they know that this audience will gravitate to. So that comes through quite clearly. So in terms of the insight, this is really interesting to me, actually. So the insight here, if you think about it, is somewhere along the lines of the power of threes, right? So if you think about the product that they're trying to sell, it's the Mountain Dew combined with the juice combined with the caffeine. So I would bet my life that these people sat around a table and started talking and said, my God, that is so random. What if we took 3 other random things and put them together, like a puppy, a monkey, and a baby? So the insight here is really around that power of 3 and that unforgettable, ability to create something really unique. Oh, excuse me. To create something really unique by combining really unorthodox items into sort of one whole. So that was really exciting about this campaign. And the message, I mean, this one is also very self-explanatory. And honestly, that's the power of it. You know, if you see an ad and you watch it and afterwards you're like, I'm not really sure what they were trying to get me to do. I'm not really even sure what they were saying. It was really philosophical. A lot of the time that's a failed ad because they had too many objectives. They had too much that they stuffed into it. But this was so clear. This was so clear. Make it unforgettable. So it's repetitive. It's almost like a jingle. Make it very clearly speak to the product, the 3 items, right? So it's the 3 key ingredients is, mirroring the 3 sort of character development, and that's really it. So, this was a home run, and you can sort of see the strategy peeking through, but in the most positive way where, they sort of, this group of people really hit the nail on the head. And Holland, I'll pause there in case you have anything to add before you go on to the next one.
No, yeah, I think, Maria kind of touched on it, but when you have a brand like Mountain Dew that has such high awareness and you're launching a new product, sometimes you have to like literally get creative with what you're doing. And that's where like the strategist has to really push of like, how can you inspire a creative to do something that will really capture the attention of an audience in a time span like that? And you can just see where this was just so well executed. With that, the way that Maria and I tried to structure this was, let's go over two ads that did really, really well. One that's, kind of hysterical, one that's maybe a boring category that worked really well. And then one that was just an utter failure, which we'll leave last because that's the fun one. So starting off, this is kind of a boring category done well. So I can't really see you guys, but if anyone's familiar with this ad, this is an ad for Casper mattresses. What Casper did was they filled the New York City subways with ads like these, which are basically puzzles that you need to solve on the subway. So this one, I will just answer it to be cognizant of time, but it's snooze fest. So SN, booze minus the B, F, vest minus the V, booze fest. Snooze fest. And so this is just something that Casper had plastered all over their out of home. So I think to start off, out of home, right? A lot of people say, does out of home actually work? Billboards seems like a very old school thing. Some people associate it with print. I think it's having kind of a rebirth with guerrilla advertising and people just taking advantage of it in really fun ways. Before it was very like, McDonald's is at exit 64. Now people are getting a little bit more creative with it. It's actually extremely good mechanism for direct targeting when done right. And in this case, billboards actually, and I think this is why some people give it a little bit of doubt, capture people's attention for no longer than 4 seconds on average. And I guarantee you, whether or not I force this in front of you for 30 seconds or not, you would have looked at it for longer. And so we'll kind of dive into the strategy behind this and why this worked so nicely. So first off, the client ask. So Casper, the mattress company, for those of you who don't know, they really made a name for themselves. And the way that they did it was through a very smart brand strategy, which they brought the attention of a good night's sleep to consumers over a mattress. So you're buying a good night's sleep, you're not buying a mattress anymore, right? And that kind of exploded the category. It was rising tides raise all ships. And with that, you had so many new players and people thinking about their sleep and people thinking about health and wellness more. And so I can imagine that the client ask at this point was, how do we get to keep people's attention? People know about us, but how do we differentiate ourselves and how do we get them to think about us when they're thinking of a mattress? So really top of mind awareness. Campaign objective, for me, it's pretty clear. It's similar to, the client ask, but it's a little bit different in the sense that they probably needed to drive product relevance and consideration for the product, right? So how do you consider Casper over all others? What is the way that we can do that? And I'm sure within the objective they were looking at a very specific person because out of home is such direct marketing. So the audience, this one's kind of easy, right? In this case, it was in New York. I'm imagining it was urban, a working class audience. So people who are commuting, people who, you know, maybe have a certain income level because they can put themselves on certain trains. But the other key factor here is when people think of an audience, a lot of times they think of male, 24, makes 50K plus, lives in California. Audience isn't always that. It's interests and hobbies and psychographics as well. So it's not just kind of like the on paper, who are you? It's like what's in your head too. So I imagine that these are also focusing on people, and the reason that they chose New York is Casper, it comes in a little box. It's a mattress that really comes in a box. You don't know how it got in there. And New Yorkers need packages to come in small shapes to get into our small apartments. And so that was probably a primary reason as to why they created an out-of-home campaign, and that's definitely who this audience was after. So the insight. Maria mentioned this before, but the insight is really what the basis of the strategy is and what they're pushing off of. And I think there's really two insights here. And in strategy, insights come in various shapes and sizes. So one is a value and one is a behavior. So starting with the value. People aren't interested in mattresses, but people are interested in sleeping well, especially now. I mean, this happened before. Everyone's in their homes. Everyone's overworked. We need a good night's sleep. And I will pay money for that, but I won't necessarily pay money for a mattress. So selling off, that was kind of their push off point, right? So all of the out of home is about sleep, a good night's sleep, a snooze fest. There are naps. Like I can give you a plethora of them if you're interested. The second is that on the subway, people are bored and they're playing games. And that is a behavior. And this is a behavior that they tapped right into an existing behavior, but just inserted their own brand. You're on your phone, you're playing a game, you look up, there's a game right there. It takes time. You need to get, you know, maybe it's like 2 minutes to solve it, sometimes longer. They also had a stream of them. So it's perfect for your commute time, and it's tapping into a behavior that they knew everyone was already doing. The message is pretty clear. It's think about your sleep, right? So people aren't really doing it. Sleep is important. We're kind of getting nailed in the head with that. And the message is also kind of subliminally, you're having fun, go to our website. Look at more of our questions and solve our problems and get the answers to them, which I can tell you, I went to their website to solve one of the puzzles. I have never, ever typed in a URL directly into a search bar off of an out-of-home ad until Casper nailed it. And this is just a really good execution of how to capture someone's attention and really smartly and strategically drive people to take an action in maybe a vehicle that people don't normally do that, right? Because it's not easy. You can't just click on it. So that's kind of that, right? I mean, they nailed it. It's a boring category. They drove people to the website to consider them. They did it playfully. They tapped into an existing behavior. And this is where the strategy is peeking out. Honestly, the strategy is saying itself. Go solve problems or solve puzzles on our website. But it's able to capture your attention, and you're staring at it for so long that you are seeing Casper, the word Casper, for sometimes your entire commute. And that's a way to really kind of get in people's head for top of mind awareness, and that's how they really succeeded in this campaign. Maria, any ads before we jump into our epic failure?
No, that's perfect. And I am cognizant of time, so we'll go quickly through the last one. So the ad is actually 2.5 minutes long, which is just—
You guys are totally good.
Oh, we're good.
Totally
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, so then, you know, let it rip. It's horrible, so I apologize.
Some say never, but they never done come. Yeah, and took our trust. It's been winning, but the lovers ain't done. Yeah, not on my watch. Yeah, if that took all my rights away. Yeah, if that telling me how to pray. Yeah, if that won't let us demonstrate. Yeah, oh, we are the lions. We are the chosen. We gonna shine now. The God. We are the movement. This generation. You better know who we are. Who we are. Yeah, if sunset fire when the fire was high. No, and so the light. Yeah, took all my rights away. Yeah, telling me how to pray. Yeah, living the cold and the pride. All of the lions are shy. Working so hard to unite. United, we tired of lies. Tired of lies. We are the lions. We are the chosen. We gonna shine now. The God. We are the movement. This generation. You better know who we are. Oh, we are the lions. We are the chosen. We gonna shine now. The God. Yeah, we are the movement. This generation. You better know who we are. We are the lions. We are the chosen. We gonna shine now. We are the movement. This generation.
Should we cut it? Was that, did you all have enough?
Yeah, I mean, it gets me every time.
All right, let's unpack it. What was the client ask? So it's actually very interesting to learn that this was actually produced in-house. And I do think that that is a cautionary tale. Not to say that things should not be produced in-house, but if you've ever heard the saying, sort of drinking the Kool-Aid, so having been on the brand side, it is very easy to do that because you spend X amount hours a day talking about your brand, living your brand, loving your brand, believing every single word that you write about your brand. And if you're there, you're not writing anything bad about your brand, right? So sometimes, you know, the magic of an agency is actually just to be that that third party, right? They don't have the buy-in, they don't drink the same Kool-Aid, and a lot of the time they can be that little voice, you know, that sort of gives another perspective, and that's really valuable. And we'll talk about other voices that are very valuable that were not at the table. So here the client ask was honestly to themselves, but what rings really clear here is they wanted to be culturally relevant, right? They wanted to be a part of culture, and they wanted to be a part of it, you know, musically. They wanted to be a part of it from, you know, the icons of a generation. They have Kendall Jenner in here, right? They wanted to be a part of this movement that they believe that millennials and Gen Z were making. So culturally relevant is sort of the terminology, right? That I'm sure was being thrown around a lot in that boardroom. So with that, we can go on to the campaign objectives. So the interesting thing here, and I don't know if you guys noticed it, so it's almost 3 minutes of ad, but the amount of times that you see the product is actually quite few. And that's because everyone knows Pepsi, right? They've been around for so long. You know, if there's something that we test for called unaided recall, which would be through the roof. That means if you were to name, you know, 5 soft drinks, if I were to ask anyone on the street, you know, it's very, very likely that Pepsi would be one of them. So for them, that memorability that we explored, you know, in Mountain Dew with Puppy Monkey Baby, and you know, showing the product over and over and over again so people remember it, is not as necessary, right? So they have a platform and they have the time to do something else and to say something else. So the campaign objective here was less about memorability, definitely not about awareness, but it was about, you know, making people think about Pepsi as a brand for them. They wanted consumers, the intention behind the ad, the objective here was to watch the ad and to think, right, I want to be a part of that tribe. You know, that is representative of me and my beliefs. And that means, you know, I will feel proud walking down the street with my can of Pepsi. And obviously, you know, it didn't go as planned, but that was the hope. And so if we go into the audience, so it's very, very clear that the campaign here is aimed at young people. So definitely millennials, definitely Gen Z. And it's very, very probable that someone in charge of this campaign had read a statistic that said something like, millennials are the most diverse generation, or, Gen Z is disrupting gender norms. And the reason I say that is because, they open on a man of Asian descent, and then they move very quickly to the main character, who's a woman in a hijab. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the reason that it's a little bit questionable here is that it feels like they're simply checking the boxes versus actually celebrating, our cultural differences, our backgrounds, our skin colors, all of the things that make people beautiful, right? So here it feels quite forced and strange, and so.
Before we move on to, someone wrote in one of the comments of, does the strategist brief the creative? The answer is yes. And I think one of the reasons that this failed so miserably was because, as we kind of say, internally, when your strategy is showing its underwear, it's really that they were checking boxes, and in a brief from a strategist, you brief the creatives on what needs to be done. And it is up to the creatives to then bring that to life in a way that it tells a story. And as an audience, you don't see the brand saying, can you make sure that every single race is there? Can you make sure that there's just as many women? Start with an Asian guy, which I want to be completely clear and show you kind of some of our internal baggage. It happens. And clients will say there are not enough of this gender, not enough of this race. There have been boards of check boxes to making sure that things are literally checked off. And this is an example of where that is just so obvious to the point that you feel that the whole issue is being appropriated.
Yeah. And this is a part, we talked about having the right folks in the table, and, not these, this group of people who developed this ad, they didn't have their agency partners to sort of, raise their hand. They also didn't have, they didn't have the sort of inclusion that they needed to hear from, from the trans people, from people of color, and to hear how they best want to be represented, right? So that was a big fail in this part, and hopefully the brand learned quite a lot from it. So in terms of the insight, I wish it were deeper, but what I want to do is I want to just read to you guys the lyrics of the song, because I think that, I kid you not, they may have just listened to the song and that was the insight. The lyrics go, we are the lions, we are the chosen, we're going to shine out the dark, we are the movement, the literal movement, this generation, you better know who we are. So, I mean, that, that for them, they just wanted to capture this generation in all its glory, with all the reports and all the studies that say that this generation is changing everything, flipping things on its head. And the other thing that I will mention here as part of sort of my dialogue about the insight, my monologue rather, is that they also used Kendall Jenner, right? And the insight here on Kendall Jenner was just that she has so many followers. She's a really powerful force. She's going to distribute the message for us. And again, this is where it sort of fell flat and it turned into a tactic and not a strategy, which we talked about before. So, if you're going to use a celebrity, you better have a really, really good reason to use the celebrity. They better have an, authentic voice, a part of this message that you're trying to put out there. And Kendall Jenner just felt completely out of left field. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I mean, it was just so strange to see her. And so, this is another, again, it's sort of showing the underwear. I think, Holland, it's a great reference. This is truly strategy showing their underwear. And finally, the message, so I think that Pepsi very desperately wanted to be, sort of the Patagonia of the beverage industry, in the sense of, if you think about Patagonia and everything that they're doing, they were a brand built from the ground up based on their mission and their belief system. And everything they do, even within their advertising, is often having to do with their mission. Versus Pepsi is truly a commercial brand. And when they made this really hard pivot to try to be, sort of belief focused or mission focused, and champions and provocateurs of the generation, that's where they sort of misstep, and the message just sort of fell apart, right? Because at the end, she's also drinking this Pepsi can. So is it about it being commercial, or are you sending me a bigger message? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to give cops Pepsi cans? Like, the whole thing just kind of fell apart into pieces. So unfortunately.
Yeah, and just to kind of caveat on that, there was so much press about this afterwards that some people who worked on it came out and said that the message was supposed to be that Pepsi is kind of this like equalizer, like everyone drinks it. But again, you can see how, like, if it's not strategically presented in the right way with creative thought and prowess by people who have that as their career, it can really fall flat.
And the last thing worth mentioning here is, we didn't talk at all really about testing, but testing and, aggregation of that kind of data can be a huge part of the process that is actually very valuable. And you'll hear people say, well, you can't test it. You never know how it'll do in market. It's not a perfect sort of formula, but you get really, really good indicators. And whether they didn't test this at all, or whether they didn't test this with the right group of people, right? Something sort of whizzed by without them realizing what, the kerfuffle that they would cause in market if this launched.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we can take any questions.
Every time I have to watch that Pepsi ad, it just feels like it drags on forever. It's just like watching a slow train wreck.
Yeah.
All right, guys, if you have questions, go ahead and do the hand raise thing. Last week we were shy. Last week it took a couple minutes to get up and going on questions, but I know you guys have questions for strategy.
I can, if I can prompt people, if you want to know like weird questions that we get from clients or weird objectives that we've ever gotten and how we've approached it.
I have a quick question because I feel like with this is for everyone. It's not my question, but with art direction or copywriting or production, like there are very, very clear routes through which to become like these roles, and every strategist has a different background. Like you guys said, you both have different backgrounds. What are a few of these paths, and what are things that students can do to be a strategist in a few years?
I mean, I'll let Maria speak too, but there are so many paths that can bring you here. And I think the end goal of what makes a strategist love their job and function really well in the position is just the desire to know more, ask why, and think critically. I think asking why is definitely a huge function of our job. So a lot of people who apply to strategy are psychologists, actually, or people who are in psych degrees. That gives you a really good background of just understanding human behavior, right? Advertising is really a push off of that. Same with my background was in statistical economics. It's following patterns and trends to identify what could be done, which drives brands. I think, Maria said, even working on brand side, you start to understand all of the nuances that, the problems you have and the questions and the solutions that need to answer them. And that can be an interesting entryway in as well. I think, it's a little bit different than art direction and creative because it doesn't have to be this hard, fast, kind of specific skill set, other than this like passion to unearth why and just really think critically.
Yeah, I completely agree. The thinking critically is key. We talk about curiosity is really interesting. It is a trait, inherent trait of most strategists that I've ever met. And one thing that's a little bit maybe of, an unorthodox opinion, but I think also trying lots of different fields, because I think part of the reason that, that you know, what I think made me a strong strategist was actually some of my background in account and sales. Because I think that, you know, if you could have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't articulate it, if you cannot sell it, you know, it's not going to make it past the door. So I think, you know, having a little bit of jack of all trades mindset of not being afraid to touch a lot of different competencies, I think will just make you actually a much stronger strategist. And also that said, that if you didn't start on the path of like strategy, meaning you don't have a psych degree, maybe you did go into some kind of sales, it's a very easy pivot into strategy if you have that curious mindset and that desire.
Yeah, actually, Maria, that's a good point. And we jokingly said I should mention this, but I actually will. I didn't know what strategy was until I came to Gray. Like, I didn't even know the word existed in the advertising field. I was hired to help the whole agency use data to drive their creative decision making, and that's where I learned it. And that's why I say, like, it really is more of a mindset than like a physical trait.
I see a question. How did you know when to pivot to strategy, or did it just happen? No, for me, it was a very strong desire. So I think I mentioned I was in account management, which is a little bit more of like that sales role. You're more client facing. And it was just not making me happy in the sense of, I think I mentioned, it doesn't seem like it, but I'm extremely introverted. And just constantly being on the phone with clients, constantly having to do FaceTime was just exhausting me. And I realized, you know, my passion was actually for, you know, sort of sitting in my bunker and asking why and thinking through things. And so, you know, I begged and pleaded with my boss at the time. She started giving me assignments, strategy assignments while I was still in account management. So I started sort of getting my training wheels, and then they pivoted me. So luckily in most big agencies, you could do that quite easily. So yeah. Yeah,
mine was a really similar story. So I was in data, and like I said, and I'll be completely transparent, data can be fun, but it can be mind-numbing. And for me, it was the desire to see my insights to fruition. I think, you know, when there's a lot of silos in some agencies and some brands in general, you come up with a really unique insight, and then what? And for me, being part of the story that was told afterwards was when I realized I wanted to pivot. And I think that's another good point. Storytelling is a huge aspect of strategy. You know, I still am working on it because my brain is so linear and stories are not. And I think that was when I realized that I needed to incorporate strategy into my work. Okay, this is for Holland. What would be some good resources you recommend to enable a junior talent to be proficient with data? Excellent question. So my favorite thing about data is how democratized it is right now. So I think there's a lot, and I might be bashed by other advertisers saying this, there's a lot of tools out there, and I can tell you they are all the same. They are just marketed differently to make us feel like they are different. Every social listening tool is the same, every data aggregate tool is the same, and they know how to market, and so they make you feel like they have different use cases. So there's a lot of open source tools. I use R. So R is really scary because it's coding, but you can literally Google, how do I write code for this, and copy and paste a script and run some really interesting programs that you don't need to be overly proficient in coding. Also, Excel is like my bread and butter. It becomes addicting in there, again, our open source ways of understanding that. I also like to remind people that Maria and I use the word data a lot, and people think big data, scary data, boring. Asking a simple survey is data. Google surveys is a way that Maria and I collect data. Walking down a CVS aisle and seeing how awkward people get in the feminine care section and just tracking that is data. There's really different ways, but I'd say, like, if you're trying to get in the data strategy field, things that people would look for would be something like R. And again, like I said, you could download it for free, and Excel, and then the rest of the tools is figure out one and you could figure out all of them. Yeah.
One of the topics, one of the questions that's come up frequently through the kind of courses, and I see it reflected in the subreddit a lot, is, in my first job, should I go in-house? Should I go agency? And I think Maria's story specifically probably tells a really good is a really good anecdote as to why agency is like a really nice place to start, because it does let you, if you know advertising is the thing, you don't know which area to be in, like an agency is a really nice environment because the path to that place is really probably a conversation with your manager. But that said, I do think there's like a lot of merit to it, because Maria also talked about this, like that, you know, being brand side and being in-house somewhere is also a really good place to get to know all of the ins and outs of like, what are your clients going to be thinking about, like when you get to, you know, a conversation with a creative agency, even if that's where you want to be. Adetunji, I see you circumventing the hand raise by going with the comment questions, and I that's a good strategy, but I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask for real.
Is it the puppy monkey baby question?
Actually, I'm cheating because I have 2 questions and I put only one of them in the chat.
Okay.
I'll let you choose if you want to answer the one in the chat, but my big question is, what is the best way to show your thinking as a strategist on the internet?
Interesting. Maria, I'm gonna let you take this one.
Honestly, to write. You know, it's funny. I think that's an amazing question. And, you know, as business owners, this is something Holland and I are figuring out ourselves, you know, because for us, we're still a young business. We're just under 2 years old. You know, so for us, you know, besides our sort of group of loyal clients, like how else do we show our chops? And it's been writing. And it doesn't necessarily mean long form. It could be short form, right? You could write little snippets of what you're thinking about. It could be commentary to ads. It could be, you know, thoughts that you have about how strategy should be done, how you're doing it differently, which, you know, I think a lot of the time fresh talent like yourself is doing it differently and doing it better, to be honest. So, you know, just don't be afraid to put your voice out there. And I think it's the absolute best way to show your thinking, really better than anything. And also, I'm sorry, one last thing I was going to say, sometimes it's almost better to do it actually absent of creative or not next to creative, because creative can outshine the strategy oftentimes, and people mistake the strategy for the creative. So if you write and you just write your thinking, what's going through your head, that's going to speak for itself.
Yeah, I was just going to echo Maria, even like, so for myself, like I said, where my background was not necessarily in writing, and it's a full transparency, not my strong suit. It has been the best way to communicate how you think, and something that we've been working on. And I personally have been working on, because I think, you know, one thing that someone told me is if you can't say it in one sentence, you don't know it well enough. And I think that in terms of, you know, kind of distilling your strategy, just practicing that over and over, just with writing and being vulnerable, you learn a lot. And you, like, the more you write, the more you understand how to synthesize a point. And that is like really what strategy is at the end of the day.
Thanks, Holland.
Brilliant insights.
And if you want to know the puppy monkey baby question, I imagine that there is some sort of thing, like if you say the same thing 15 times in a row, someone will remember it, and that might be a data point that got put in there. Puppy monkey baby was said like 20 times. So I'm sure there was pieces of data behind it. And, you know, sometimes data, like, it doesn't need to be so rigid. It could be funny enough of like, what is like the top 3 things that like everyone loves? Babies, puppies, monkeys. That's what Google search said. And that could be data informing it in itself.
Do you want to tackle Alex's tag along question here?
Oh, okay. This is an interesting one. I'll be as transparent NPC as possible. So for me, I came to Gray trying to teach everyone, and not teach, because not like people didn't know, but making it part of the status quo to incorporate data strategy and storytelling with data into Gray. It is very hard to retrofit a way of thinking into an organization of over 1,000 people. It takes patience, it takes virtue. It took me 5 years. And I think when you realize you are onto something, and you are getting recognized by clients and your peers, but maybe the infrastructure surrounding you isn't recognizing it, it's time to jump ship. If you have a good idea and you're trying to push it through an organization that's not catching it on, do it on your own. I actually was just talking to Maria about this. We had an idea and we puttered around with it. Like, full transparency, Maria and I talked about starting a company together for 3 years. New Year's, one night, like, we both kind of got together and was like, we have this really good idea. We just need to commit. We met 3 times a week, every week for 6 months. And once I realized that I wasn't committing fully into just that is when I jumped ship from Gray and started my own thing. But for me, it was much more, I had a good idea and I was trying to retrofit into something. It was like trying to put a wrong puzzle piece into a puzzle, like just start a new puzzle, let's go.
I feel like, oh, go ahead, Maria.
No, I was just going to address the next question. I'm sorry. Did you want to add something to that, Joe?
I was just going to say, I feel like everyone who spent some time at an agency, like, has that experience of the cultural lag just being such that you cannot get through that amazing idea that you have. And I think that's like some of the advice that we've gotten so far has been to treat being a creative or treat being in advertising like you're a entrepreneur. And I think that's like, you guys took that really literally, but there are so many ways to like think that way that I think are super, super important to like succeeding in this industry.
Yeah. I was just going to address Olivia's question. I think that's a great one. If you could give your 21-year-old self a piece of advice, I think it's to be a yes person. That's the number one thing that actually helped me grow in agencies, where it can be extremely competitive and really difficult to get a leg up and to get promotions. But I always took this approach of, even if I was too junior, even if I was unqualified, I wanted to raise my hand to try. And just one anecdotal story, because I really think it sort of set the tone for the rest of my career at Gray. I volunteered to be on a pitch, and this was on Friday. They agreed that they would let me be on it. They sent out the briefs to everyone. And I spent the entire weekend crafting the strategy, even though it wasn't asked for it. I was just super junior. I was supposed to be in the back taking notes, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to write the strategy. And even if it's terrible, like, who cares? They'll throw it out. And I submitted it on Monday. And exactly my draft that I submitted on Monday was the one that was used in the client meeting. So, it goes to show, just because you're young doesn't mean, you're not smart. Just because you're young doesn't mean your opinions don't matter. Just because you're, the most junior in the team doesn't mean you can't present. So I would just say, to get ahead, just be a yes person, volunteer, and don't be afraid to have your voice heard. Really, like, our voices are the most powerful thing we have. And that's why I was saying about the writing, and to everyone here, like, if you're in the room, let your voice be heard. It's going to work.
Yeah, I would echo exactly what Maria said. And another thing that was something that I did that I didn't really notice until we were on the phone with our old CEO the other day, and she said she was, somewhat worried about this working from home because the most growth she ever had in her career was from eavesdropping. And I completely agree with that. Listen, like, I would tell myself to go back and just, like, always listen to your surroundings. Like, if there is senior leadership making decisions around you, listen to it. Even if it's internal weird stuff, like, it's decisions that are based on experience, and it can really help your growth. And ask why. Like, I was never afraid to ask my boss why he made a decision. And I think that helped me grow a lot. And I wish I asked why more, and I wish I eavesdropped a little bit more. Nika, you're asking how COVID-19 affected our business. That's kind of a funny story. We're lucky enough to say that it hasn't. A funny antidote is that a lot of the research Maria and I do is kind of like unorthodox ways of running surveys or getting people to talk to us, just so it's like in a more casual environment. And I think like open-ended questions and surveys are something like you don't really lie too heavily on. But since everyone has spare time right now, survey incidence rates increased like tenfold, and people are writing their life stories out in open-ended surveys to us, and we're getting insane insight. People have even said, thank you for asking me and including me in the survey, which is like if you experience market research, something you will never ever see. Half the time they just write no in the comment box to get paid. But we've actually been able to somewhat benefit from behaviors of people right now, just inherently by boredom, spare time, looking for extra change, because a lot of surveys are incentive. But you're right too, in the sense that clients are asking more about understanding their consumers. Maria and I both kind of were talking about it, and Maria wrote a piece about how all of the insights we did for 2019 are pretty much like out the door. Everything people cared about, their values, what they were spending their money on, no one cares about that anymore. Like COVID just like tossed everyone's ideas of their future out the window. And it has made brands need to relook at who like the new version of their consumer is, and if it's even the same person, if it might be a completely different target now. Like the word essential means different things to different people now, and that has made brands need to look back at their strategies and the people around their brand.
That's awesome advice. Before you go to Adetunji's next question, I'm going to unmute Joffrey for his. I'm going to try. There we go. Joffrey, don't leave us hanging. Okay. Adetunji, you're up.
Love that question. So it's actually more on us and our positioning. And the question is, you know, considering how nearly free-form business problems are, and the fact that GoodQues comes in such a high level to these problems, how do you convince people you can help them? So it's actually our positioning. It's on us. And what do I mean by that? So I think when you're starting your own business, it's very different to force yourself to distill things rather than when you're giving advice to clients. It's very easy for us because we know how to look at a client's business and be like, you have too many objectives, you have too many of this, your positioning's wrong, and fix it. But when you're applying that same logic on yourself, it's a lot more difficult. So I think when Holland and I first launched GoodQues, we started from this really broad place of like, we're gonna solve it all. Like we're gonna attack every business problem. Hiya! You know, like we were ready. And the truth is we've had to distill more and more and more and more. And so where we are now is that we specifically specialize in business problems that have to do with understanding consumers. So we've been drilling on the empathy piece. We've been drilling on the, unorthodox data piece. So now it's a lot more clear when you should come to us. So, say that your brand is simply not resonating anymore. People aren't buying your product. Well, the question is suddenly like, well, what has changed in people's behaviors and motivations? Like why, do I have a new consumer that I should be speaking to? And that's sort of a perfect question for us. Again, the launching in the US example that I gave before. So we're really thinking about the people, and that's going to be our bread and butter versus any business question you can possibly ask.
Yeah, I think secondarily to that is just case studies. I mean, they're kind of like sales 101, but when you get involved in a business problem and you're pitching, or you're even just giving proposals, which I would say like pitching has been changed to paid pitches or proposals, just showing how that you would answer the question differently. It would be a great way to get people to kind of want to work with you. Yeah.
All right. Oh, I'm going to see if I can get Joffrey unmuted here.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
What the heck? I was trying to say thank you for this talk, and it was great. And then my question is, so there are like so many different specializations. And when I first I was dubbed a strategist by my CD. He dubbed me a creative strategist. And since then, like I've seen as like comm strategists and connection strategists and brand planners and cultural strategists. And like, I've applied to so many of these jobs and I feel like I'm trying to chameleon myself into these different roles. I'm just wondering if like, you think there is a meaningful distinction in all of these titles, or if there's kind of like one main thing, which is like a way of approaching problems and solving problems that is strategy, and everything else is just like a medium or a channel or a particular like business type. And, I shouldn't worry about those distinctions right now and plotting out my career.
That's a great question. I'm going to answer. I'll let Maria answer too, because I don't know what her opinion is. But for me personally, it's a general way of thinking and an application and a methodology to how you problem solve. That is, and it's how you apply it. And I think the best strategists are able to take their way of thinking and their methodology and how they kind of craft that problem and apply it to whatever that medium is. That being said, there are like certain little things that you need to know. Like, so for comms strategy, like communication strategy, like what channels you're on, you need to be fluent in that vocabulary. But I do think that the general level of thinking and how you think will get you to the right answers. Like once you're familiar with what that particular like language is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm more of the belief that all of those things can be more or less interchangeable, to be honest. I think that, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a trend where, social and digital like splintered off, right? And it was like social strategist, like regular brand planner. And then I actually think we're coming back into a world where you kind of need to have a lot of these different, foundations of knowledge, unless you're like a hyper specialist in something like search, which is like so niche and strange, and you need to speak that language, right? But between like a comm strategist and a creative strategist, like, I don't know, I can see you doing both jobs honestly tremendously well, and I think that that's an easy, like, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I also do think that the more of those like specialists that work on an issue, the more silos there are, the more telephone there is, and that's where like the generalist does have a little bit of an advantage when working on like the holistic project.
That's the answer I wanted to. Thanks. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We should probably also say that the day-to-day of those jobs can be super, super different. If you're a creative strategist, you're going to end up working way more down funnel on how do we we've got like a creative strategy set, or we've got creative pieces set. How do we deliver these most effectively to comms planner, which is or comm strategist, which would be before you even get to big creative idea, or maybe just after you get to big creative idea. So I totally agree with you guys on skill set and thought process. And those are things that it doesn't matter what kind of strategy you're doing, that is honing that skill. But you will definitely end up doing different stuff across those different roles.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
No problem. Adetunji, do you wanna just come on and talk about this?
Yeah, I think that would be easier. Thank you. Okay, so this is my last question. So I've been thinking a lot about what strategists do on a daily basis. I listened to this podcast by Natalie Kim called We Are Next, which is really, really great in explaining this kind of thing. But I'm still confused as to, say, for example, while you both were at Gray, how much of the job is writing a brief or working on a pitch or researching insight or looking at data? And then how much of that is presenting it? In terms of ratios, is it 90% researching all the time, or is it something a bit less? How much of it is workshopping the big idea with creative people or whichever people who are senior stakeholders?
Yeah.
That's the question.
It's a great question, and unfortunately, I don't think you're going to like my answer, because the answer is it depends so much on the nature of your client and the nature of the cycle of where they are at. And I'll give you an example. So one of my clients was Marriott, and we took almost a year to bake their big sort of big reveal campaign for a new project that they were doing. So if you think about it, at that pace, you're probably doing, you're writing a brief maybe once, you're not really pitching anything. You're, maybe researching insights, but about other things, and you're just tweaking and optimizing and supporting sort of the rest of the team. versus one of my other main clients was a brand, CoverGirl. And they were on this cycle, like this innovation cycle, where they were producing new projects and, you know, releasing new campaigns every few weeks. So we were in this constant, you know, writing a brief, researching insights, you know, doing this constant thing. And then, you know, the nature of how much are you pitching, honestly, that also depends on you. It depends on, you know, how much do you want to volunteer for pitches? How much are you brought into that? Because a lot of the time, at least the way it's positioned in most agencies, is that pitches are not a given. It's more of like a privilege. So, you know, there's also that bit of it. You know, so, and how much of the idea is being workshopped? That answer is the idea is constantly being workshopped, right? Like whatever you write on day one, by the time it gets to launch day, it's likely very different from what it started, because there, you know, there's so many people involved. So, you know, the answer, unfortunately, is there isn't a hard or fast ratio that I can give you. But the beauty of that, what you should look forward to, is that, you know, that sort of tumultuous nature of the job is what makes it really exciting. Because if you can, you know, if you had to write a brief every single day that you were in your job, like that would just be miserable, right? But you come in and you don't really know, maybe it's a brief, maybe you're doing insights, like, you know, so it actually is quite exciting and really invigorating, and you're working with so many different people. So, you know, there isn't a ratio, but I would say that that's a positive factor of the job, not a negative.
Thanks. Actually, your answer didn't disappoint me at all. I was kind of half hoping that it depends. Like, I think I'd be more sad if I knew that it was going to be one thing every day. I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Good.
Thanks.
Good.
Yeah, that's never the problem, is having the same thing.
Yeah.
Joffrey, man, being shy today. Come on, man. Unmute.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Absolutely. It's just like I don't know, another question. It's like, I hear in all these chats, like, what do we do after strategy? Well, I'll go more brand side. But like, you know, Maria, you came from brand side. So it's like, then what do you do if, like, you know, do you go back? Like, do you even see yourself leaving your consultancy and doing something else? And if so, like, what would it be?
I mean, the pipe dream Maria and I always talk about is we have helped launch so many brands and we're the experts. So why not apply it to our own brand, our own product? I think, you know, when you get that level of critical thinking and business problems and business solutions, you are the ultimate kind of person to be in that position to launch. I don't know, the benefit, at least when I think about strategy, like it can apply to so many different fields, whether or not it's going into branding. I mean, full transparency, before I even got to Gray, I had a quarter life crisis and went to nursing school. And even that is strategizing in some sense or another, right? It's making executive decisions based on people and how they feel. And so for me, it's like, world's our oyster. But the pipe dream Maria and I always talk about is creating our own product to launch, since we've done it for so many other people, right?
Yeah, and Joffrey, don't feel confined. Like, you're doing strategy today, like it doesn't mean you just do something totally, like I hope to write a book one day. I don't know, like I want to do something totally different. Like, our life is so long, and you know, I think we're lucky enough that we don't have the same sort of shackles that our parents did, of like, you choose a job and you're in it for the next like 50 years. Like, you know, you get tired of strategy, do something else, go into nursing school.
Yeah, maybe not that, but yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. That was a balanced and inspiring answer. Thanks.
I like the people without knowing what your product
Yeah, right?
to buy.
Maria, we already have consumers.
You got at least 22 of us.
Yeah.
That might be the end of our questions. Do we want to take back over the screen share and talk about the assignment?
Okay, so the assignment. we had a lot of fun kind of dissecting these ads and understanding, you know, what was the strategy behind it, right? What was the message? What do we think the client asked? How did they build insight around it? And we thought that we would give you the assignment that we just kind of did. So one, you saw it live, you kind of understand what to do. And two, I can tell you right now, it's a little bit fun to kind of pick and dissect what it is. So the assignment is essentially, it's your turn. Pick an ad you love or hate, but you believe was effective. And then dissect it into the following parts, which is what we went over, which was the client ask, the campaign objective, the audience, the insight, and the message. And that's really it. Yeah, I think have a lot of fun with it. I think dissecting ads that you utterly hate is just as fun as ones you love, because you can kind of get at that underlying, like, what were they thinking, and have fun with it. We're excited to see what you guys come up with.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the submissions on this one. We've had so many good ones from both the sides of brands you love and brands that you don't love. So it'll be interesting to see how these break down. Anybody have questions or anything before we call it on the assignment? Nope. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for the talk. This has been so informative, so insightful, and like, I think I've taken some career advice from this, so hopefully the rest of the folks have as well.
Thank you guys. We're so lucky to be here.
Yeah, this is so fun.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.